Okay, folks, the last lap. So, before we start, I'd like you to think about how fit you are at the moment for learning. What your emotional and physical state is, because one of the things I do quite a lot with children with all sorts of needs is try to get them thinking about being fit for learning and being ready for learning, and it not all being about the teacher does all the thinking like that. So, in a moment, when I want you to think out of 10, these are your hands, 10, I'd like you to show me, when I say go, how you would rate yourself out of 10 in how fit you are for learning. Okay? So, ready? Go. Oh, not too bad. Sure. Oh, well, a few people, Okay. So, what I'd ask you to do is, what do you need to do if you were a 3 or a 4 to put yourself in a better state? Do you need to sit up differently? Do you need to take a few deep breaths? Do you need to stand up and stretch? Do you need to lie down? But this is what we would think about anyway when we think about how do we get ourselves fit for learning. So there was a lot of 7s, but there was a few lower marks. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of little activities to see if that changes the fitness. And then we're going to look at them in terms of what that means for children that may have ADHD, okay? So the first activity is I'm going to give you permission to talk to your neighbour about whatever's on your mind at the moment that might be nothing to do with this course or with ADHD or anything. It might be how you're going to get home, or if there's going to be a long queue at the bus stop or something, or it might be you're starving or whatever, or it might be you're feeling really tired. But whatever it is, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to talk about what's on your mind. And again, when I put my hand up, if you could put your hand up and stop talking, okay? So with the person next to you, whatever's on your mind, just get it off your chest. Okay. I see we're not getting quite as good at following the rules as we were this morning. One day of thinking about special needs and you've all got them. Come to a session on ADHD and you're not going to behave like that. You know, once you start thinking about it, you think you've got everything. Okay, why did I ask you to do that in terms of children with maybe issues around attention and hyperactivity? Because often children come into school with their minds full up of other stuff. It might be really important stuff, like, you know, will Dad be at home when I go home tonight? Or the police were around last night, are they going to take someone to prison? And it could be quite other stuff, like it's my birthday in 2 days' time and I'm really excited and who's going to come, you know? And during the day, things can happen in school and you know, there's been a fight in the playground, or I've just been to PE and we've been running around madly and I'm really hot and bothered and excited. And they come into our class and they find it hard to settle. And we're moaning about them, about their behaviour, but actually, sometimes what they need to do is have a couple of minutes to get the stuff out of their head so they can get on with the lesson. So, because sometimes what we do as teachers, we spend a lot of time going, shh, shh, be quiet, settle down, you know, stop talking, come on, open your books. We spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes sometimes in some lessons getting anyone to concentrate. When we might have been better saying 3 minutes to talk about whatever's on your mind and then we're going to do the lesson and you need to focus. And children that may have ADHD need that kind of strategy. They need sometimes to let out what's on their mind. So that's one reason we're going to do it. We'll come back to that. Right, we're going to do another activity. For this activity, I'd like you to stand up in front of your chairs and make sure there's nothing on your chair, okay? So you're just going to stand up in front of your chair, make sure there's nothing on it. Okay? So standing in front of your chair, noticing there's nothing on it. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to, in a moment, ask you to close your eyes. And when I say go, I want you to measure a minute in your mind and sit down when you think a minute has gone by. Okay? All right, so when I say go, you close your eyes. When you think a minute's gone, you sit down, and you can open your eyes when you sit down, okay? So ready, go. Okay, that's actually a minute. Now that's quite interesting. Some people sat down after about 20 seconds. A lot of people sat down after about 40 seconds. Some people were obviously getting there, I think, might be about to sit down when I said a minute. So why is this important for children that have ADHD? Why do you think this is an important activity to do with them? Yes, this lady said to get a sense of time, because one of the things that children with ADHD cannot do is they cannot measure time in their head. So they've been waiting with their hand up and they think it's hours, and it's been like 3 seconds. You've given them some work to do and you've asked them to get on with it until you come back, and they're calling you over, or they're running around the room, or they're not doing it because they think they often think they've been there for hours. As do quite a lot of kids that have trouble with focus and concentration. So this activity is a bit about focus and calm, but a lot about what we might do then is we'd find someone who sat down at a minute, and we'd ask them what they did, and then we'd try and copy their strategy. So we'd do it again, but we'd try and say they were counting in a certain fashion. We try and count like them. Because the other thing is, what we need to create in our inclusive classrooms is children that learn from each other. So like I said this morning about learning about anger, some children will need to learn there's a way in your mind for learning about time, and that there may be people that can do it a bit better and they can learn from them. So that we're creating a kind of shared, we're helping each other climate. Because one of the things that also sometimes help with ADHD is their behaviour can be a bit annoying to other children. Or other children can think it's funny and therefore make them worse because that's funny. Okay, so just a quick check. How fit are you for learning now? Could you just show me, again, out of 10 with your hands when I say go? Okay. Okay, a couple of people have come up a bit, I can see. So we'll move on. I just wanted to try and shift your own state a little bit. So, ADHD, myth or reality? I don't know what it's like here in your country, but in the UK and in America, it's almost like an epidemic. You know, in certain areas, I used to work in Essex, you know, just outside London, and at one point I became convinced it was something in the water. Because certain doctors, if you went to them, the kid would get put on medication and be told they had ADHD. Now, the danger with that is, if we're over-diagnosing, sometimes we then decide it's a medical problem and we give them the tablets and that's the end of the matter. The child often thinks, well, I've got ADHD, I can't help it. The parent often says, well, he's got ADHD, he can't help it. But as a teacher, we think, well, he's on the medication, there's nothing I can do about it. Yeah, so it's actually quite a disempowering model. Even if, so what I wanted to look at was ways we can think about it as teachers and things we can do to help these children, whether or not we agree with the diagnosis, whether or not they've been given medication. Yeah? So what I'd like you to do with the person next to you is you've probably come across something like this in your classes. Could you just take a minute and think about what are the behaviours that you see that you think might be indicators that a child has got ADHD. Okay? So, for example, has anyone got an example that comes to their mind straight away? Okay, not being able to pay attention maybe for a long time or sustained attention for a piece of work, yeah? Okay? So there are other things that might be things that you think... Yeah, so inappropriate moments, is it? Like when you should... Yeah. So speaking or... Yeah. So kind of singing or talking at times when it isn't the right time to be doing it. Yeah, okay, well, that's nice. Okay, so 2 minutes with the person next to you. Can you come up with any more that you think are kind of indicative behaviours? Because we need to look at the behaviours in order to do something about them, okay? So just 2 minutes. Okay, can I... You see, I nearly did something there. That's the thing you should never do with children with ADHD. Break your own rules. You know, I made the rule with I put my hand up and then I started talking over it. That's the sort of thing that most kids can cope with. But children that are having problems with rules and understanding stuff completely makes it too inconsistent for them. So I obviously did that deliberately to show you what not to do. And at this late stage in the evening, I'm not going to collect loads of ideas from people. I'm just going to show you one way of looking at ADHD, which is from this thing called the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of America, number 4. It's actually of no interest to me at all, but I'm going to give you this theoretical framework before I move on to what's maybe more interesting for you as teachers, like what do you do? But if a child was going to be diagnosed with ADHD in most places in the world, they'd use something like this. They would now talk about 3 different types, predominantly inattentive. So I know some of you are probably talking about not being able to pay attention, being distracted very easily, not being able to focus, that kind of behaviour. It used to be called ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder, but now it's called this PIT. Hyperactive impulsive is that thing about shouting or singing or not being able to sit still, walking around, getting up. That gentleman just got up, as I said, getting up, walking around the hall. And someone thinks it's a combination, okay? So inattention, you might have been talking about things like this. Fails to give close attention, difficulty sustaining attention, yeah, difficulty with detail often, easy distracted. You know, and this is an interesting one because sometimes when you have a child with a special need in your class or a couple of children, you feel that you need to be a specialist and, you know, oh my God, what do I do? But it's not rocket science, okay? Children with ADHD are easily distracted. So if you have in your room a blind with a string on it, or you have a metallic radiator with a knob on it, where do you sit them? Yes, you sit them away from it, probably nearer you, or with a child who's well behaved and good at learning. You know that as teachers. That's what I mean. It's not rocket science. Trust your own instincts and ability as teachers to look at the behaviour and think, okay, this is what happens, so this is how I'll prevent it, or this is how I'll help it. So, you know, you know how to differentiate your lessons to have different short or timed activities, or give timings and structure to activities. So some of it is good practice and common sense. They often don't follow instructions. You might have been talking about that. They appear not to do what they're told. Now, this is very interesting because if you think they're just being naughty and not doing what you're telling them, you can feel quite annoyed with them, and you might be even quite punitive. One way of looking at ADHD, a guy called Russell Barkley has written quite a lot about this, is that there's certain things in their brain they have problems with, and one of them is something called working memory. Working memory is the part of your brain that you hold things in that you know you've got something to do and you've been told how to do it. So say you've been given instructions, you know, come in, sit down, open your books, go and work in threes, hand in your poster when you're finished. Yeah? That's all your working memory. Children with ADHD have problems with working memory. So it's not that they don't follow your instructions or they refuse to do it or they're being defiant. It's they have problems holding it in their mind. Sometimes they actually say to me, things fall out of their head. You know, I've often asked them, when they say, you see, if a child says to me, I can't remember, I always say, that's like what? And then they go, what? And I say, another one of Mari's weird things she's asking us. And then I say, no, you know, when you can't remember, that's like what? Because when you say that's like what, it often takes them into something that's a metaphor or something for their brain. And often they'll say, it just falls out of my head. There's a trap door and it falls out of my head. So what they need are activities that help them develop ways of holding things in their heads, or supports that help them hold in their head what they've been told to do. So for example, you probably already do activities like, if I've got vocabulary on the board, some pictures, and I close your eyes and I'll rub out one of them, and you tell me the missing thing. Or you know that game, Kim's game, here's a lot of objects, I'll cover them up, take one away, tell me what's missing. Spot the difference, here's two pictures, spot the difference. I'm going to tell you a story, put it in order as I tell it. Yeah, all these are all activities that we do all the time in the English class, but are actually about working memory, holding stuff in your brain long enough to do it. With children with ADHD, if you deliberately build in more of that, they will find it hard. See, the tendency is, if we see they've got a problem, is we do less of it. So we think, oh, they can't do that activity, so I'll find another way around it. If you only do that, you never help them develop the skills they need. So maybe you need to acknowledge it and say, I know it's hard. I know it's hard. I know it feels like it all falls out of your head. But I think this will help you learn it. I think this could make your brain get better at it. And the other thing I'd always say to kids with ADHD is trust your own brain, trust your own thinking, because they don't, because of this thing of it falling out. So, organisation, homework, losing things, forgetting things. We can see why they cause us problems. They might need, some like visual timetables. They might need on the board in the lesson pictures of the order of the lesson to help them remember. But if you look at that list, how many of you have done those things in your life? Yeah, failed to pay attention, sometimes got distracted, don't do what you're told, forget something, get to the lesson with the wrong things in your bag. You know, on my way here, before I came here today, yesterday, I went to Cork Airport and I actually drove into the wrong car park. I went into the short-term car park, which cost a fortune, as opposed to the long-term car park. I won't be billing the British Council, don't worry, because I drove out again. But that's an example of, why did I do that? I don't think I've got ADHD. My mind was preoccupied. I was obviously thinking about something else, and I probably was quite tired. When we're tired, preoccupied, stressed, or anxious, we often do these kind of things. So the reason I'm telling you this is, don't always assume that your children are doing it because they've got ADHD. They could be doing it because they're tired. They could be doing it because they've had a whole day of lessons that they didn't understand anything in, and now their brain's just gone blank. So that's the inattention. The other part would be the hyperactivity, yeah? And again, I saw a bit of this in the plenaries this morning, in the group. People fidgeting, people talking to each other, people quite restless. What you could see, some people got up and walked out and went to the toilet or came back. You know, we all do it when we're bored or tired or in wrong situations. So before you say this child's got ADHD, ask yourself, am I actually teaching a really boring lesson? Have I been going on and on for too long and they need to do something? Am I not using visuals or kinesthetics or doing activities because I'm just teaching like I like to learn, as David said this morning? All these things you need to ask yourself before you start on about anything to do with special needs. The thing about children with ADHD, which makes them slightly different maybe to some other children, is they tell you, they blurt things out, because they also can't regulate their emotions. So when they're bored, they shout out, "This is really boring." When you give them something that you did last month but you forgot you've given it to them already, not that ever happens to you, I'm sure, and they say, "What are we doing this for? We did it already," they're probably right. You know, when they say, sometimes they walk in and they'll say, "Oh my God, this room stinks." It probably does. But all of these are things that we maybe have learned not to say. The good side of it is when they're really happy or excited, they want to share that with you as well straight away. There's a lot of positives. So one of the things they need to do, or be a help to learn, is to understand that the emotion, like I was saying this morning, is not wrong. But we maybe need to choose when we say it, or who we say it to, or how we say it. So in your dealings with them, you might need to acknowledge that. You know, you might need to say, okay, it might be a bit boring at the moment, but it's a bit rude to say that. As opposed to, stop being so rude. Because they need to learn that, and it's quite hard for them. So in this model, the diagnosis is if there's 6 or more symptoms, and if it's at school and in another context, different context. So again, if I'm called into a school to see, because they think some child, people are very quick sometimes to put labels on and say, "Oh, he must have ADHD." I would look at, is it in all lessons? Are these behaviours in all lessons? All times a day? With certain teachers? With certain types of activities? You know, if the child doesn't do it in science and doesn't do it in sport, PE, but does it in English or French or whatever, is that because these lessons you can get up and do more kinesthetic touching and doing, and is it in these lessons they're getting loads of worksheets or getting long essays or there's a lot of teacher talking at them? We as teachers need to look at that very carefully before we put all the problem into the child. But if, you know, sometimes there are children when across the board that might be happening, and then it may be of concern, you might need to get someone to assess them. So I wanted to mention a different point of view. Like I said to you, I don't believe the water in Essex had some chemical in it that gave everybody ADHD. I think at the time in the school I worked with a lot of children that came from very chaotic, inconsistent, quite sometimes violent households, environments. And if you live in a chaotic, unpredictable household, what you might learn and how your brain might be wired is to be on alert all the time. Because I don't know if I get a slap or I get shouted at or I get told that's wrong or, you know, there was dinner there today but there might not be dinner there tomorrow. You're scanning the world all the time for danger. It's something we call hypervigilance. You've gone into, and this is something I teach children, all children, but particularly children that are having these kind of problems, your reptile brain. Maybe some of you know this theory of the triune brain. And if we were going to do it, maybe we will. Okay. Any volunteers? Yeah, let's try to do it how we do it. Who's a bit kinesthetic and needs to come up the front and just do something a bit fun and silly? Anybody? Who's brave? Yeah, well, thank you. One person. We need 2. We need 3. Well volunteered. 2 more people. Are you going to let Serbia down? No. Come along. Well, thank you. Another lady. And one more. Oh, well done. Give them a round of applause. Brave. They don't even know what they're doing, you see. If you're... Okay? Now, this lady, I want you, in a moment, you're going to represent the reptile brain. Now, the reptile brain is the brain that, when we were cavemen and women, the only thing we needed to do, if we saw a dinosaur, was we needed to know, is it bigger than me? Can I fight it? Or do I need to run away? Or should I hide? So fight, flight, or freeze. It's our most basic instinct. When under pressure or threatened, we tend to go into it. The next stage, so you need to be thinking about something you're going to do that will represent that in a moment, okay? We'll do a kind of statue thing, okay? Now, the next bit to develop is the mammalian brain. And again, with kids, I say, you know, like dolphins, we think they might have feelings. Mammals might have feelings. So that's when we know we have feelings. We're angry, we're upset, we cry, we're hurt. We don't have a name for it, but we just have them. We experience the feelings. So you're going to represent the feelings brain in a moment, okay? The last bit of our brain to develop was the thinking part, what we call the neocortex. The thinking part of the brain is the part of the brain that I'm getting a bit hot and bothered now. I think I'm getting angry. I need to go for a walk to cool down. There's like a thinking process that we can apply to the situation, our feeling, and what we do. Very often, children under pressure or from these kind of circumstances or under stress even from learning, English often brings out that kind of stress, revert to the reptile brain or the mammalian brain. If you teach them it, you can actually say, hang on a minute, what brain are we in? And how do we get out of it? You have to be prepared for them to say, Miss, you're in a reptile brain, can you get out of it? Because that's actually what happens, and some teachers don't like it. But okay, so you need to represent the thinking. So I'm going to say go, and I just want you to do a kind of freeze or statue of the brain you're in, okay? Go. Very good, very good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, you can imagine certain kids get a lot more into it and you have hundreds of people going around being dinosaurs and reptiles and fighting people. But the point is, the kind of behaviour when you're hypervigilant can look like ADHD. Because I can't focus on my work because I'm always, you know, something might happen behind me or something might happen out there, or I don't know, can I trust the teacher? They need to know it's safe. You know, that phrase I said about you don't need to be like that in here, it's safe. Or maybe you're worried about a lot of stuff, but you can relax in here. They need this kind of experience to know that what's happening to them. So, okay, so what I'd like us to think about is if we're going to work with these kind of children, we need to start by thinking about what the behaviours are, the issues, which we've done. Then we need to think about what are their needs, okay? Because these children, there are needs. I'll give you another example actually related to this, to show what I mean. Children who live with parents who have addictions have often had a very inconsistent kind of parenting. You know, the interesting thing is often we're quite judgmental of parents who have addictions or mental illness, bipolar, that sort of thing. But parents with addictions can parent perfectly well some of the time because they're not drunk all the time and they're not high all the time. And at those moments, the child probably got perfectly normal, acceptable responses to their behaviour and to their needs. Other times, the parent, quite literally, was not with them. They might have been in the room, but gone, or actually gone. Those children will have learnt that the adult forgets you when they're not with you. So again, sometimes that kind of behaviour shows up like ADHD, because they're the kind of kid that's always going, miss, miss, miss. And, you know, if you walk over there, get upset because you're not come back to them, because they can't believe you haven't forgotten them by going over to work with someone here. So their need is to know that you haven't forgotten them when you're not directly engaged with them. That makes sense? So if you think about the need, you'll end up thinking about a strategy. So for that sort of child, you might say, I know you thought I'd forgotten you, but I hadn't, if you've kind of come back and gone away. Or you might say, remember last week when Phil was telling us, and you mentioned their name to show you remembered something about them. Or you might say, I see your football team won last week. Did you go? Because you remember about their football team. All of these are things good teachers do anyway. But for some children, it's amazingly magical and important because you're showing them you remember them and they don't need to be trying to grab your attention all the time when you're somewhere else. So that's a need. But there's other needs. There's the need about working memory. There's the need about whatever. Can you take a couple of minutes with the person next to you? can you think about what I've been going on about, and can you just come up with any needs you think these children might have that are showing these behaviours? Okay? Not the strategies, not the answers, because we're going to try and think a bit like therapists, not teachers. And think about the needs. 2 minutes. Hey. We're all getting bored of it now, but okay, there's a piece of paper coming round, and can I ask you to take one between 3 so that you can see it? There's not one for everybody. So please be well behaved and not show behavioural difficulties by ignoring that instruction, or showing poor working memory by showing you didn't understand and you're going to take one anyway. One between 3 so you can see it, yeah? Because on that sheet, yeah, the other page, ladies. This side, the side that has a couple of kids and the needs, there are a summary of needs. Yeah, we'll look at this page first, yeah? Where is it? Is there any going round anywhere? There's some still coming that way. I know, see, I knew they would. Some teachers, ladies, one between 3, ladies. How many? 2, is it? 2. Oh, you're going to do 4, okay. Okay, if you are in a 2, can you please join up with somebody, because everyone needs to see it. I'm not going to believe you've got ADHD and your poor working memory meant you forgot my instructions. Can we all see one? Is there anybody, can you just put your hand up if you can't see one? Oh, okay. Could you maybe join up with those people there? Could maybe you come just here? I know. You're not going to be able to do the activity. No, I haven't, because it was meant to be photocopied. Okay. All right, if you can't see one, when we do the activity in a minute, maybe you might want to move over, because there's people over here that have got it, okay? If you look at the needs that are on the sheet there, okay, I'll just read it out for people that can't see it. You might have been thinking of some of these needs. The main need is to feel safe and secure. You know, all of these children, as I said, a lot of it is like a response to anxiety. So how do you make them feel safe and secure? They need to believe the teacher likes them. They need to know the teacher sees something positive in them despite their behaviour. Yeah? They need to have, and this thing about safety, they need to have clear and consistent rules. And as I said at the start, it's very important because lack of consistency completely makes it difficult for them to manage their behaviour, whereas other people might manage it better. They need to have support in remembering what to do and maybe how to learn, which is what I was talking about. They need to have help in managing their restlessness or inappropriate behaviour. They probably need to have some help in developing relationships with other learners, because sometimes they can annoy other learners. So anything you do that creates more cooperative, understanding each other, seeing each other's strengths. They need to have some help with that short-term memory, as I mentioned, and they need to have some help in managing time. Yeah? So if you can see the paper, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at the 3 children talking about their lessons. I'd like you to pick one of those children, it doesn't matter which one, and decide when you look at it what you think their needs are from that list. Okay? And for those who can't see a piece of paper, I'll put a child's comments on the screen, that's the word. I told you my working memory. And just think together what you think the needs of the child are, even if you can't remember all the ones on the paper, okay? Couple of minutes. What are the needs of those children? Okay, there's one for people to look at that can't see the paper. Remember, the needs are around feeling safe, consistency, help with behaviour, help with learning, help with memory, help with time, help with relationships with others. They're all the kind of needs. Okay. Okay, if we could just stop there for a moment as time is running on. What I'd just like you to do, if any of you could just put up your hand and just tell us one need you think one of the children has got, either the one up here or the ones on the boards, on the paper. Anyone like to tell us what they think? Just by putting your hand up. No, what you were just talking about. If you have see, I've confused you in my instructions. If you've got the piece of paper, could you tell me one need you think the child has? Yeah? Yeah, on that. What did you think? Which one did you look at? Asha, okay. And what was the need you think of Asha? Right, help with relationship with others. Okay, support in what to do and how to learn, yeah. Okay, feeling safe and secure and managing time. Okay, anybody, thank you. Anybody look at one of the others? My check, anybody look at him? Or did you all look at Asha? What was the first? Jane. Any, yeah? What needs do you think, yeah?
She needs to believe the teacher likes.
Yeah, because she goes on about the teacher shouting and not liking her. She needs to believe the teacher likes her. Right, help with that short-term working memory thing, yeah.
To have help in understanding and managing time.
Yeah, the time thing again.
Because she
Yeah.
Okay. To have support in remembering what to do and how
Yeah, so have some support in remembering what to do and how to do it. Like I said, maybe visual cues or some help with it, somebody working with someone else. Okay, so if you've got the piece of paper, what I'd like you to do now is turn it over. And I'd like you to, there's a list of strategies there that may help with children who've got ADHD. Okay? What I'd like you to do is read through the strategies, choose one of the children, and think which strategies would help them. Okay? If you can't see the piece of paper, what I'd like you to do is think about the needs of the child you looked at, this one here, and think maybe of 3 or 4 things that you as a teacher you think you could do, what your strategies would be, okay? So if you can't see the paper, look at this example and decide what you as a teacher could do to help. And it might be things I mentioned, it might be things you know already. But if you've got the paper, read through the list. And if you want to see the paper, go over there and join someone. And decide which ones would help one of those children that you were looking at. Okay? Just 3 or 4 minutes to read through or to think about that. Okay, so perhaps we can think about this together and I can maybe explain any of the other strategies. Okay. Okay. If you were, can you just listen, we just have a look at it. If you were looking at, Jana, anybody like to tell me a strategy that they thought on the list would help Jana, thinking about her needs? Any ideas? Sorry, having a daily work schedule that's checked by each teacher to help with the organisation, is it? Okay. Anything else for Jana that you thought, thinking about her needs? Okay, yes, the Catch Me Being Good card. Some people ask me about that. Catch Me Being Good, particularly for children that are getting a lot of negative, feedback, is the idea that you make a card and you write Catch Me Being Good and you decide what the target is. So if the target is focus on my own work or wait patiently or take my turn, and they have it on their desk, and at the bottom you have sort of boxes, and when you're going around the class, you can just tick when you see them on task or doing what you like. It's the kind of non-verbal way to acknowledge when they're doing the right thing, because as I said this morning, sometimes these kids only get noticed when they're doing the wrong thing. So that's what the Catch Me Being Good idea is about. Thank you. What about the next child? What's that? That's Asha. Is it any strategy from the list for Asha? Okay, so encourage some independent learning by saying how long they have and encouraging like time limits. So I'll be back, I'll do 5 and then I'll come back to you. Or, here's the clock or the watch, wait 5 minutes, then I'll come back to you. So that idea of trying to encourage them to do it. Okay, what about the third one, my check? Anything you think would work with him? Yeah. Okay, this thing about restlessness, allow them to stand up and stretch. Maybe have somewhere they can go if they're getting a bit restless, Yeah, so actually decide. I used to work with a boy who we gave him a piece of paper that said, when Adam gets too restless, he has permission to go out and run around the football pitch as many times as he needs to. Now, a lot of teachers didn't like that because they said, oh, he'll just use it as an excuse to get out of his lessons. And this is where it comes about how you frame what you think these problems are. Do you think it's just being difficult and a pain in the neck, or do you think there's a real need? And if you do something like that, as I spoke about change this morning, you will expect it to go wrong. So he might start overusing it, and then you have to discuss with him the consequences of that. We trusted you to do this. I've noticed you've used it 5 times a day. I wonder if it's just because you don't like maths. How can we make this work so that we can use it properly? The problem with sometimes those kind of strategies is we give up too soon. When the learner starts using it wrongly, we say, oh, we can't use that, and the teachers say, all our colleagues say it's a waste of time. But the mistake is the point when the child learns how to do it properly. So this one, anyone that was thinking about this one? Any strategies you thought might work with this one? So in terms of planning, short timed activities, I realise that too long. Yes, so different ways of presenting with mime, with pictures, with role play drama, all these sort of things that might help with that kind of, yes, definitely. Anything else you thought, or anybody looking at that now with the child, thank you, with the child that would help them?
Okay, try the first 3 questions and then I will come back.
Yeah, that idea of try the first 3 questions and I'll come back, so a few of those things. I also think with this one, acknowledge their feeling. I know it's hard and you're fed up and I need you to have another go at it, or here's another way of doing it. Because the feeling is probably legitimate, it's just they're showing it too obviously, they're putting their head down and sighing. And the difficulty when you're teaching, it'd be like, I've got a colleague somewhere I work that if he's in a presentation, if you're doing a presentation, he sits in the front row and closes his eyes. So it's quite hard not to be really annoyed and want to kick him or something because you think he's fallen asleep. But that's his way of thinking. The same thing with this child. It's quite hard as a human being not to react to someone going, oh, for God's sake, dramatically putting their head on the desk. when actually, you know, there's other ways. Or the other thing is there's other ways you can tell me that. Okay, I know you're fed up. There's other ways you can tell me that. You know, maybe you just tell me quietly, or when when we're doing something else, or we can meet after lesson and you can talk to me. You know, you kind of trying to give them other ways all the time. So okay, so the other thing with children with ADHD or any of these anxiety-related behaviours is sometimes, like the how long is a minute, they don't have an experience of what it's like to do what you're saying. So you say focus, and they might understand the word, but they've never in their life had an example. So 2 ways of doing this. One is you set up a game in class that does it, which we're going to do just as a final activity. Or the other way is you think with them about somewhere where they are able to focus. I used to work with a lot of kids who were in the basketball team. And they used to say, oh, I can't concentrate and focus in French, I just don't get it. And I used to say, you can. I've seen you, when you take free shots and everybody's shouting and roaring in the crowd, you really focus. How do you do that? They go, oh, they often say, we get in the zone, you know? So I say, so you need to get in the zone in the French lesson. Because they can do it. They need to get a parallel experience and realise they have it in themselves, they just need to bring it into this environment. So that's one way to try and get them to think about times when they do focus, when they do concentrate, when they are okay, at finishing long things, and think about trying to behave like that in the lesson. The other way is to actually just do a couple of activities. So we'll just do one, which will hopefully finish everybody off in a good way. What I'd like you to do for this activity is you need to get into groups of about 5, okay? 4 and 6 is okay, so about 5. And what you're going to do, so I'm going to just demonstrate here, and I'm just choosing volunteers now, so could you 3 ladies just stand up? Okay, and just stand in the line, yeah. Okay, so what you'll be doing is you'll have one person in the middle, they can be sitting down, and you have 2 people on the outside. Now, your job is, I want you to talk into her ears, when I say go, about a holiday you've been on, or holidays, but like really excitedly, because your job is to distract her. Okay? We're going to ask her questions about holidays, and she's going to try and answer them. So maybe you 3 here, what I want you to do is ask this lady any question on the topic of holidays, and she's going to try and answer. When I say go, okay? So your job is to answer that. Your job is to turn around, right into her ear, and talk into her ear, distract her about your holidays, okay? Ready, go. Okay, so what? You're listening here. You've got yeah. Where did you go on your holiday? Where did you go on your last holiday? Where did you go on your last holiday? Okay, all right. You see it. Thank you very much. You see how it works. Okay, a bit unfair. I picked on you. Yeah. Okay? So the person in the middle is trying to answer the other people's questions, but 2 people in your group, their job is to talk very loudly and excitedly in the ears to distract them. When you've had a go once, change roles and have another go to see what it's like, okay? So all you need is 1 person in the middle, 2 people talking in the ears, and other people in your group asking questions. We'll stay on the topic of holidays, okay? Go. Off you go. So we got a group. You're going to work, yeah? Are we doing it, ladies? Okay, sorry, we'll have to stop there. Some people have only just started, I know, but... Okay, so that activity, calling I'll talk in your ears is what I call it, what does it show? The person in the middle, it's an example of what it's like to have ADHD. Everything coming at you, flying at you, you can't filter out what's important or what's not. So it's useful to show other children what it's like, but for the child who can't focus, when we do the feedback, we say, who focused? What did you do? And some children go, you know, I got in the zone, I zoned out. A lot of children do this, I didn't listen. Some children say, I just really looked at the person, I watched their lips. We discuss what you did that helped, because then I can say, when I ask you to focus in class, that's what I need you to do. Yeah, I need you to get into that zone where you were in the middle and you were trying to answer questions. And I know it's like the other way around, you're really distracted, but it's an experience for all of us about what ADHD is like, but how we also can learn to focus and get what I call a reference experience, so that when I say focus the next time, I can remind you of the game. Okay, so on that note, I will finish. Thank you very much for your patience.
Can I just say a quick thank you to Marie, but thank you to all of you for coming today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got some ideas, but I hope even more that you go and put them into practice and then tell us about what's worked and what's not worked and share that with each other. Many thanks and all the very best. And thanks to our online audience as well. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just say, if you want the handout, I think we can arrange to either to put it on with the PowerPoints, or you can email me. My email was on the earlier PowerPoints, thelearningharbour@gmail.com. I'll send it on to you.